Welcome to this fun project where we take everything you've learned so far and put it all together by creating this cute little guy. I've yet to decide if it's a monster, a cat or a mascot, but it's lovable and that's all that matters. This will take about 30 to 45 minutes to complete from start to finish, and my inspiration was my new character for my Android app called SMS Plus. Meet Octi. He inspired this lecture, so let's get to it. Start with a new canvas that's 1024 by 1024. Let's set our background colour by using a rectangle. This should be the same size and it needs to be positioned appropriately. At this point, I'm sure you're familiar with the alignment tools. We could have used this existing background layer and filled it with Alt-Delete, but I personally prefer to use rectangles. Next, get the ellipse tool and click to set your measurements. We're looking for 500 by 500 pixels. As for the colour, go with FF9536. This is a nice orange that will stand out against our background. Next, we have an important step. When I created this design, I quickly sketched out something that would serve as a guide. I realised that freestyling is hard to do when you haven't created projects like this before, so please download this attached sketch and place it on your canvas. This needs to be underneath your ellipse, by the way, and our goal is to get this body shape right. So lower the ellipse's opacity to about 70% or so. We want it slightly transparent so we can see the sketch. Now, with Ctrl-T, start to drag these handles to a point where it starts to match up with your template. You'll notice some parts need to be dragged inwards, while other handles need to go outwards. Even so, the result won't be perfect, but we'll enable Warp from the options bar, and this will help us out a lot. Here, I'm not going to use a preset because we have this sketch. The essential part is the lower region, where we need to make it look like this guy's sitting down. So click and drag, but don't worry about being precise on the other side. Take care of the cheek region as well, and you'll soon be flying with it. You could of course skip this step altogether, but your shape won't be as cute in my opinion. We want a fairly chubby character. Okay, I'm done and I'm happy with it. Leave the opacity as it is because we have more work to do. Next, we'll use the pen tool to create all these other components, the ears, the legs, the mouth, and so on. Make sure you have it set to shape from the top left, and if you don't have it selected, change your colour to orange. The code is FF9536. So let's get started with this top left ear. Ideally, this should be created in only 3 clicks. Let's see if we can make that happen. First, I'll start from slightly inside the body layer with a single click. Next, I'll go to the apex of the ear, click and drag towards the upper right. I'm trying to follow this curvature. Remember, you can always hit 7 on your keyboard to drop the opacity to 70% in case you haven't lowered it at this point. Now I'll click somewhere inside the body yet again, but that's not going to be a problem because all the overflowing parts will be hidden behind it. In case the curvature is not correct, you can hold the Control key and drag this handle to another position. It really depends on how much you drag, but remember, this needs to be a fun process. I don't want you to get stressed out by these details. If it's not 100% like the sketch, don't worry about it. This is just your first try. Finally, bring it back to the origin point, and this is wrapped up. Coming up is the inner ear. Here, it's the exact same procedure. Click once, then click and drag towards the top right. Click again to create the meat of your layer. Now close it off. If you do need to adjust it, now's the time to do so. Okay, this is looking good. Raise your opacity to 100% and change the inner ear's colour to a slightly darker orange. We'll focus on the actual colour scheme and effects a bit later on. Now it's up to you if you want to duplicate this ear and flip it horizontally. By the way, this is a good time to group and rename your layers. My advice is you create another ear by using the same techniques. Let me do that now. I'll click about 5 pixels inside this layer. Here, I'll go up, click and drag towards the right. Here, if you click again towards the bottom of the ear, your curve might look terrible if your handle isn't in a similar position, so you may want to hold Alt and click on this top anchor point. This will convert it, and it will allow you to change the direction of your shape with ease. The downside is that your ear will be a bit pointy, but that's acceptable in my book. Still, in this case, I'll do my best to make it look like in the sketch. Okay, there you go. Once you're done, repeat the process for the inner ear. Take your time with it, and in case you're having issues, please revisit all the pen tool exercises. Those are valuable lessons that will teach you how to handle these types of shapes. Great stuff. Up the opacity and change the colours if needed. If something is off, remember these are shape layers, so you can always switch to the direct selection tool and nudge any anchor point into a better position. Plus, by following the sketch in the background, you should have no trouble with it. Next, I'll tackle the feet. I'll speed through these elements as they're nothing new. Remember, Ctrl-Z is your friend, so when something isn't right, just undo. And although it looks cool and sexy to create as few anchor points as possible, sometimes you just have to add a few extra ones to get the right look. Okay, this is done. Let me move on to the rest. As I work in the background, I hope you're enjoying the course so far. I've made it my personal mission to create the best possible learning experience, and although some parts are fairly repetitive, like in this case here, I always try to keep it as hands-on as possible. Okay, finally I'll tackle what might be considered its front paws. In this case, after the first one's done, I'll duplicate it and position it on the other side. There's no need for anything special, as these will only be seen at the bottom part anyway. So that means you don't have to worry about how tall these shapes should be, but I advise you to go at least towards the middle of the body layer. Later on, we'll fade them out with a mask, so you'll need enough height for that. Okay, our progress is spot on so far. This is actually one of the hardest parts. After we're done with the pen tool, you'll see we'll be flying through the project. It's a great idea to constantly adjust your colours, because otherwise you won't be able to see any potential issues. For example, the feet should be placed underneath the body layer, so things like this can only be observed if you're constantly adjusting your orange nuances. Let's finish this lecture by creating the eyes. Here, a very low opacity should help you out. Start from the left one and click in the top middle part of the sketch. Click and drag towards the bottom, just where the cheek line is placed. My advice is you hold Alt and you click on this anchor point so we can set a new direction. Great, now click and drag yet again. Always go down as much as it's needed. Here I think I'll use Alt yet again, but that's not a problem. Now, here's where you can be a hero and try to warp this up with only one click, but I'll make my life easier by creating another intermediary point. Good stuff, now I can close it off. That was the hard part. For the rest of the eye, we'll use ellipses. Please note you may need to constantly switch between 100% opacity and something like 20 or 30%. If you haven't changed it already, this custom part should be white. Okay, let's continue. Get the ellipse tool from the Tools panel, click and input these measurements. The first one should be 99 pixels. This needs to be clipped to the custom shape we just drew. Now change its colour to 006D8A. This is a nice shade of blue that will create a contour. The next shape can be created with Ctrl-J. Resize it to 97 pixels or so, and this needs to be clipped as well. Now ideally, you should have somewhere between 2 and 4 pixels between these shapes, so do your best to nudge this top one into place. Make your life easier by changing its colour to 219DC6. This will help you out quite a lot. Finally, click and create a 45 pixel circle that's pure black. Position it in the centre of these two existing ellipses, and we're good to go. Oh, it seems I forgot about this small detail which makes the character that much more appealing. With the ellipse tool selected, click and input a width of 140 pixels. As for the height, something like 160 should work well, though we'll mask the bottom part a bit later on, so that's less relevant. Position it in such a way where it lines up with the sketch. This will act like an eyebrow of sorts. Okay, let's wind things down and do a quick check. Take a look in your Layers panel, and at this point it's likely to be a mess. Take a minute and clean it up. Check your colours on the canvas and see if everything is looking right. Now's the time to max out the opacity. Once everything has been handled, group all these eye layers. Now duplicate it and place it on the right side. Finally, use Ctrl-T and flip it horizontally. The only concern at this point is the pupil size. If it's too big, it may look like the character is scared or that it's staring at something. Here, I'm all set. I know this was quite a long lesson, but the other ones should go faster. I'll see you in a second.